He suspected his maid was stealing from him. For 23 nights straight, he watched her leave his building carrying bags heavy enough to slow her walk. So one November evening, he followed her, ready to protect what was his. What he discovered didn't just shock him. It destroyed everything he thought he knew. Larry Frazier was 36 years old and owned half of Manhattan. He knew every asset in his portfolio down to the square foot, every property value, every profit margin, every business relationship worth maintaining. But for 5 years, he never knew the woman who made his coffee every morning. Her name was Sheila Murray. She'd cleaned his 15-room penthouse every single day since 2019, arriving at 6 a.m., leaving at 6 p.m. She moved through his spaces like a ghost, efficient, silent, never meeting his eyes. Larry knew the names of every doorman in his building, every broker in his firm, every councilman in his pocket. But he couldn't recall if Sheila had ever spoken more than 3 words to him at once. She was just there, invisible. Until 23 nights ago, Larry noticed Sheila leaving his building each evening carrying bags she hadn't brought that morning. Sometimes bulging canvas totes, other times worn cardboard boxes reinforced with packing tape. Always heavy, always different. It kept happening. Monday, Wednesday, Friday, Tuesday, same pattern, same weighted walk to the elevator. His mind went to theft immediately. He ran an inventory check. His wine cellar, his electronics, his files, his mother's jewelry he kept in the safe. Nothing missing. But those bags kept appearing. And the question burned in his chest like acid. What is she taking from me? So on a rain-slicked November Thursday, Larry decided to follow her. He left his office early, told his assistant he was sick, went home, and waited in his car across the street. When Sheila walked out at 6:07 p.m., coat pulled tight against the cold, bags pulling her shoulders down, Larry's heart hammered. Tonight, he'd catch her. Tonight, he'd know. Sheila didn't take her usual express bus. She walked 2 blocks to the subway and took the downtown 6 train. Larry followed, 3 cars behind. The train took them south through Manhattan, under the East River, into the Bronx. Neighborhoods Larry's company owned on paper, blocks he'd marked red on zoning maps labeled future acquisition. Buildings he'd already decided to demolish for luxury developments. She got off at Hunts Point, walked 6 blocks east down streets with no working streetlights, past bodegas with barred windows, past men warming their hands over trash can fires. She turned down an alley behind a converted warehouse, brick crumbling, windows covered with plywood, graffiti declaring "Still Here" in spray paint. Sheila knocked twice. The door opened. Light spilled out, warm and yellow. She disappeared inside. Larry pressed himself against the cold brick wall at the bottom of the stairs, half hidden behind a support beam that smelled of rust and dampness. The basement stretched before him like a secret world, concrete floors cracked and patched with duct tape, exposed pipes dripping condensation, fluorescent lights flickering with the rhythm of a failing heart. But none of that mattered because Sheila Murray was standing at a makeshift whiteboard explaining mathematics to 30 children who watched her like she was handing them the keys to the universe. Her voice carried across the room with a warmth Larry had never heard in 5 years. Animated. Musical, almost. She held broken chalk in one hand and a sandwich bag full of pennies in the other, teaching long division like it was a story instead of an equation. Say you have 156 pennies, she said, spilling them onto a folding table that wobbled on uneven legs. The copper discs scattered and caught the fluorescent light. And you need to share them equally among 12 people. How do we figure that out? A boy in the front row, maybe 8 years old, wearing a Bulls jacket with the sleeve torn at the shoulder, raised his hand tentatively. We divide. Yes, baby. We divide. Sheila's smile could have lit the whole basement. But division isn't just a math problem. It's about fairness. About making sure everyone gets their share. About building a world where nobody goes without. She walked the children through it step by step, separating pennies into piles, showing them how numbers on paper translated to something real, something they could touch. A teenage girl in the 3rd row leaned forward, completely absorbed, her pencil moving across a notebook so worn the pages were separating from the spine. Mathematics, Sheila said, sweeping her arm across the whiteboard covered in her careful handwriting, is the language of building. And we are builders. Every single one of you. The children nodded like they believed her. Maybe because she was the first person who'd ever told them they could build anything at all. Larry's eyes adjusted to the dim light, and details emerged that made his stomach turn. Details he'd trained himself his entire life not to see. Sheila's shoes, the same black flats she wore every day to his penthouse, had cardboard inserts visible when she knelt beside a student. The soles were worn through. She must have been walking on concrete and asphalt for months with nothing but cardboard between her feet and the ground. The children sat on mismatched chairs salvaged from somewhere, on milk crates spray painted blue and red, on cushions leaking stuffing through splitting seams. Their textbooks were ancient, math for elementary grades, 1987 stamped on faded covers. Entire chapters held together with rubber bands. In the corner, a space heater the size of a shoebox fought a losing battle against November cold that seeped through the walls. Larry could see his breath. The children kept their coats on. Miss Murray. A girl raised her hand, small for her age, maybe 10, with braids held together by rubber bands because someone couldn't afford proper hair ties. I don't understand number 6. Sheila moved to her side immediately, not hovering but kneeling so they were eye to eye. Larry heard the girl's name, Jasmine, and watched Sheila pull a chair close, their heads bent together over the worksheet. The girl's hand trembled as she held her pencil. Jasmine, baby, look at me. Sheila's voice was gentle but firm. The girl looked up, eyes already wet. You're not behind. You hear me. The system left you behind. There's a difference, but we're going to catch you up. Together. You and me. The girl nodded, wiping her face with her sleeve. Sheila walked her through the problem, not giving answers but asking questions, building scaffolding until Jasmine climbed to the solution herself. When she got it right, Sheila's face broke into a smile so pure it made Larry's chest crack like ice under weight. That was respect. Real respect. Not the kind Larry bought, with Christmas tips or polite nods. This was the respect of someone who saw you completely, who believed you were worth the time it took to kneel on cold concrete and explain division until the light came on behind your eyes. Miss Murray, they called her. Every single child. Not Sheila. Not the help. Miss Murray. Said with reverence. Said with love. Larry had never called her anything but Sheila when he bothered to call her at all. Usually he just left notes on the kitchen counter. Please water the plants. Never a thank you. Never her name spoken with the weight it deserved. The class continued for another hour. When a boy in the back got frustrated and threw his pencil, she didn't scold him. She sat beside him and said, sometimes the world makes us so angry we want to throw things. But let's throw our anger into solving this problem instead. The boy picked up his pencil. Kept working. At 8:30, Sheila clapped her hands twice. All right, my brilliant mathematicians. Time to pack up. I'll see you Thursday. And remember, the children finished her sentence in chorus. We are builders. They filed out slowly, some hugging Sheila, others touching her arm like they needed her warmth. She handed each one a granola bar from the bags Larry had watched her carry, the bags he'd thought contained his stolen property. When the last child left, Sheila stood alone in the center of the basement. She didn't rest. Instead, she began cleaning, erasing the whiteboard, stacking chairs, sweeping with a broom missing half its bristles. The same way she cleaned Larry's penthouse, erasing all evidence of her presence. Larry stepped from the shadows. Sheila's hand paused on the broom handle, but she didn't turn around. Didn't startle. Just stood there, back straight, waiting. How long? His voice came out rougher than he intended. Not angry. Broken. She turned slowly, meeting his eyes for the first time in 5 years. Really meeting them. Not the glancing away she did every morning when she brought him coffee. Not the invisible gaze of someone who'd learned that being seen by men like Larry Fraser was dangerous. 5 years, Mr. Fraser. Her voice was steady, calm, like she'd been expecting this conversation, this moment, this reckoning. Since the month you evicted my building to make room for your luxury condos. Since you turned 614, West 139th Street, into something beautiful that nobody from the neighborhood could ever afford to enter. The statement hung in the cold air between them. Not accusatory, not bitter, simply factual. Larry felt his throat close. I didn't know. No. The word was soft but absolute. You didn't know because you didn't ask. Because men like you don't ask. Why didn't you tell me? Sheila set the broom against the wall. She began packing up the pennies, counting them with the care of someone for whom 156 pennies mattered. When she spoke, her voice carried the weight of decades. Because men like you don't ask, Mr. Fraser. And women like me learned a long time ago that being seen can cost us the little we have left. She looked at him fully, and Larry saw what he'd never noticed because he'd never really looked: the exhaustion, the strength, the whole universe behind her eyes. I couldn't risk you making this about you. About your charity. Your tax-deductible generosity. These children need to know they matter because they matter, not because you needed them to make yourself feel less empty. Each word landed like a hammer. True. All of it. You evicted 200 families from that building. I was one of them. First place I'd felt safe after my divorce. You turned it into condos that start at $4,000 a month. I share a studio with 2 other women now. We split 1,803 ways. I sleep on a mattress on the floor. She picked up her bags, the same bags Larry had followed here, had suspected. Empty now? Always given, never taken. So no, Mr. Fraser. I didn't tell you. Because I've been making you coffee for 5 years, and you never once asked how I take mine. Because you never asked where I'm from, or what I care about, or why I show up at 6 a.m. with a master's degree in education that I earned working 3 jobs. The words hit like blows. A master's degree. 3 jobs. 5 years. And he'd never asked. Sheila walked past him toward the stairs. Stopped at the bottom step. Didn't turn. Lock the door when you leave, Mr. Fraser. I trust you know how to do that. You've locked enough doors behind enough people. She climbed the stairs and disappeared into the November night, leaving Larry alone among mismatched chairs and ancient textbooks and 30 children who called her Miss Murray with more respect than he'd shown her in 1,825 days. The space heater clicked back on. Larry stood in its feeble warmth and understood, finally, what Sheila had been stealing. Not his property, his chance, his last opportunity to be something more than his net worth, his final thread of connection to the world beyond his penthouse walls. She'd been stealing nothing. She'd been giving everything, and he'd been too blind to see the difference. The call came at 2:17 a.m., a number Larry didn't recognize. He almost let it go to voicemail, but something made him answer. Maybe the hour. Maybe the fact that he hadn't slept since leaving that warehouse basement. Mr. Fraser. A woman's voice, professional but urgent. This is Mount Sinai Emergency. We found your card in a patient's bag. Sheila Murray. She's been asking for you. Larry was in his car before the nurse finished explaining. The emergency room smelled like disinfectant covering something darker. Fear, pain, the metallic tang of suffering. Larry gave Sheila's name, and a nurse led him through double doors into curtained bays where machines beeped and people suffered in thin hospital gowns. Sheila was in Bay 7. Line in her left arm, blood pressure cuff on her right. Her eyes were closed. Her face had a grayish pallor that made Larry's stomach clench. A doctor appeared, young, exhausted, wearing scrubs with cartoon penguins. Her name tag read Dr. Chun. Are you family? She asked. Larry hesitated. The truth felt too shameful. Yes, I'm her employer. I have her insurance information. Dr. Chin's expression said she knew he was lying but didn't care. Severe diabetic ketoacidosis. Blood sugar over 600. We've stabilized her, but it was close. Another hour, and we'd be having a different conversation. She has diabetes. Type 1. Requires multiple daily insulin injections. She's been rationing, stretching supplies that should last 2 weeks over a month or longer. Dr. Chin's voice carried weary familiarity with this tragedy. Insulin is expensive. People make choices. Food or medicine. Rent or medicine. The basement classroom flashed through Larry's mind. The donated textbooks. The granola bars Sheila handed out. Does she have family? Dr. Chin asked. Someone we should call. I don't know. The words tasted like ash. 5 years. He knew nothing about whether she had a mother or sister who should be standing here instead of him. Dr. Chin left. Larry pulled the visitor's chair close and sat down to wait. At 3:30 a.m., with only beeping machines and distant crying to keep him company, Larry noticed Sheila's bag on the rolling table. The same bag she'd carried that first night. The same bag that started everything. He shouldn't look, but he needed to understand. He opened it. 3 bottles of insulin. 2 full, 1 empty. Larry picked up the empty bottle. 90-day supply, filled 63 days ago. She'd stretched it, rationing her own life so children could learn. Next to the insulin, a ledger. Page after page of Sheila's careful handwriting. Every dollar tracked with ruthless precision. Rent, $600. Subway, $127. Food, $180. Phone, $45. Insulin, 247. School supplies, 215. Books, 89. Snacks, 156. Space heater repair, 75. The total, 1,734. Her entire paycheck. No savings. No buffer. No room for error or joy. At the bottom of the most recent page, skip 2 insulin doses this week. Feeling shaky but manageable. Children need new pencils. Larry's hands trembled, turning pages backward. Months blurred together. Every penny accounted for. Every sacrifice documented. Every choice between her survival and those children's education decided in their favor. Then he found the folder. Manila, labeled, the cost. Larry opened it. The first page, a spreadsheet. Fraser Development Projects, 2018 to 2024. Every property his company had acquired, renovated, demolished. Addresses, dates, units. All information in his own files. In reports he'd approved without reading the human details. But Sheila had added columns his reports never included. Families displaced. Businesses closed. Community spaces lost. And handwritten notes in blue ink that turned statistics back into people. William's family, 3 generations in Harlem. Forced to move to Albany. Husband lost job. Daughter dropped out of college. Cornerstone Baptist, 112 years old. Congregation scattered. Pastor had heart attack during eviction. Garcia's Bodega, 47 years. Demolished for luxury gym. Owner now works at Walmart in Queens. Page after page. 2,000 names. 2,000 families disrupted for profit margins and quarterly returns. Halfway through, Larry found the page that stopped his breathing. My own apartment, 614, West 139th Street, Unit 4B. 5 years. First place I felt safe after my divorce. Garden in the courtyard where I grew tomatoes. Mrs. Chun next door taught me dumplings. Marcus upstairs played saxophone on summer evenings. Community. Family. Home. Gone in 30 days. I had nowhere to go. Finally found room share in Mott Haven. $600 a month for a mattress on a floor. Started working for Fraser same month. Needed the money. Irony not lost on me. Larry read it 3 times. The courtyard. The tomatoes. Mrs. Chun. Marcus and his saxophone. An entire universe that existed before he decided that building was worth more empty than full of people. He turned the page. More entries. More buildings. More families scattered. At the bottom of the last page, below 12 demolished community institutions, Sheila had written one final note. This is not malice. This is indifference. Which may be worse. Dated 3 months ago. 3 months of carrying this documentation. 3 months of coming to his penthouse at 6 a.m., making his coffee, serving the man who destroyed her home and 2,000 others. And she'd never said a word. Larry read through the folder again. Then again. The sky shifted from black to gray to pale blue. He read names until they blurred. He read addresses until they became a litany. He read Sheila's notes until they carved themselves into his chest. At 6:47 a.m., Sheila's eyes opened. She looked at Larry, at the folder in his hands, at his face. You read it, she said. Not a question. Her voice weak, hoarse. I'm sorry. The words came out broken. Larry realized he'd been crying. Sheila, I'm so sorry. I didn't know. You didn't want to know. There's a difference. I should have. Should have what, Mr. Fraser? Her eyes hardened. Asked where your maid lived. Wondered if the woman scrubbing your toilet could afford medicine. Considered that buildings might have people in them who call them home. Each question landed like a blow. I almost died tonight. Rationing insulin so I could buy pencils. And you know what I thought? I thought, at least he won't have to know. At least he can keep pretending he's a good man who built his empire on empty lots instead of people's homes. I didn't. Larry stopped. Because he had. That's exactly what he'd done. Pretended the buildings were empty. Pretended the people didn't exist. Pretended displacement was an unfortunate side effect instead of a deliberate choice made in board meetings where no one asked about the human cost. Apologies are free, Mr. Fraser, Sheila said. What costs something is change. The machines beeped. Down the hall, someone called for a nurse. The hospital woke around them. Larry sat holding the folder. 2,000 families, 47 businesses, 12 community spaces, 1 woman's tomato garden, and understood that sorry wasn't enough. Sorry was the sound privilege made when it finally noticed the damage. Sorry was what rich men said when they wanted forgiveness without consequence. What would change cost? Larry asked quietly. Sheila's eyes opened one more time. She looked at him, calculating, measuring, deciding if he was worth the answer. Everything, she said finally. Change would cost you everything you think makes you who you are. She closed her eyes and wouldn't speak again. Larry sat beside her bed until the social worker came, until Dr. Chen returned and told him Sheila was stable and he should go home. He left the hospital at 9:30 a.m. carrying Sheila's folder, walking into a November morning that looked like every other. People rushing, cars honking, the city grinding forward. But Larry wasn't the same. He'd left something in that hospital room. Some comfortable fiction about who he was. Some willful blindness that had protected him from seeing clearly. He drove through the city he owned, past buildings he'd bought and neighborhoods he'd transformed, and for the first time saw the ghosts. 2,000 families, 47 businesses, 12 community spaces, one woman's home, and he understood that Sheila was right. Change would cost everything. His reputation, his fortune, his identity as a successful developer who made smart decisions and created value for investors. The only question was whether he had the courage to pay it. The boardroom occupied the entire 42nd floor, with floor-to-ceiling windows offering a view Larry had always considered his reward for success. The city spread below, like a conquered kingdom. Today, looking down at those streets, he saw only the neighborhoods he'd destroyed, the families he'd scattered, the communities he'd erased. 12 men and 2 women sat around the mahogany table that cost more than Sheila's annual salary. Larry's board of directors, his business partners, the architects of his empire, gathered for an emergency meeting after his 6 a.m. email, urgent, Hunts Point project cancellation. Richard Vance, his CFO, spoke first. Larry, the demolition starts in 48 hours. The contractors are mobilized. We're talking about $340 million in projected revenue over 5 years. I'm canceling it, Larry said. The silence lasted exactly 3 seconds before the room erupted. You can't be serious. The contracts are signed. We'll be sued into oblivion. Larry waited for the noise to die down. He'd spent 7 days preparing for this moment. 7 days since he'd left Mount Sinai Hospital carrying Sheila's folder. 7 days reading and rereading the names of people he'd displaced. 7 days understanding what change would actually cost. I'm not asking for your permission, Larry said quietly. I'm informing you of my decision. The Hunts Point warehouse will not be demolished. It will be converted into a community learning center, fully funded by the Fraser Foundation. Marcus Webb, his oldest partner, the man who'd worked with Larry's grandfather, stood up. His face had gone red. Your grandfather built this company on the principle of maximum value extraction. He taught us that sentiment has no place in business. He would be ashamed of what you're proposing. Larry met his eyes. My grandfather built this company by buying tenements from slumlords who squeezed immigrants into fire traps. He profited from desperation and exploitation and called it business acumen. He built his fortune on the backs of people who had no choice, no voice, no power to refuse him. If that man would be ashamed of me today, then I'm finally doing something right. Marcus's jaw worked. You've lost your mind. No. Larry opened his laptop and projected a presentation onto the screen behind him. I finally opened my eyes. The first slide showed the Hunts Point warehouse. The next showed 30 children sitting in a basement, learning mathematics from a woman who rationed her own insulin to afford their pencils. This is what we were about to demolish, Larry said. Not an empty warehouse. An underground school serving children our developments displaced. Run by a woman who lost her home to one of our projects 5 years ago. A woman with a master's degree in education who cleans my penthouse because we priced her out of the neighborhood where she'd built a life. He clicked through more slides. Photos he'd taken over the past week. The children's faces. The donated textbooks from 1987. The space heater fighting a losing battle against November cold. Sheila standing at a cracked whiteboard, teaching division with pennies because the education system had abandoned these children and she refused to let them fall further behind. We did this, Larry continued. Every development we've built, every neighborhood we've revitalized, we've destroyed communities and called it progress. We've displaced 2,000 families in the past 6 years alone, closed 47 small businesses, demolished 12 community institutions, and we never once asked where those people went or how they survived. Jennifer Kim, his lead counsel, interrupted. Larry, I understand you're having some kind of crisis, but this is a corporation, not a charity. We have fiduciary responsibilities to our investors, which is why I'm presenting a new business model. Larry clicked to the next slide. The Fraser Foundation will be restructured with community governance. A board of directors drawn from the neighborhoods we've impacted. Real decision-making power, not token representation. Next slide. Future developments will maintain a 70-30 ratio. 70% affordable housing at rates tied to area median income, 30% market rate to sustain operations. Current tenants in properties we own will be offered pathways to ownership through rent-to-own programs and community land trusts. Next slide. And every executive in this room, including me, will take a 60% pay cut. That money will fund the transition, establish community development funds, and provide reparations to families we've displaced. The room had gone silent. Not the silence of consideration. The silence of people witnessing something they couldn't quite believe was happening. Sarah Chun, his CFO, leaned forward. Larry, you're talking about voluntarily destroying your own net worth, gutting your company's profitability, giving away control to people with no development experience. People with lived experience, Larry corrected. People who understand what housing means because they've lost it. People who know what community is worth because we took it from them. This is professional suicide, Richard said flatly. Maybe, Larry agreed. Or maybe it's the first honest thing I've done in a decade. Marcus stood again. I worked with your grandfather for 30 years. I watched him build this company from nothing. I watched him make the hard decisions that weak men couldn't stomach. And I'm watching his grandson throw it all away for what? Guilt. Some misguided attempt at redemption. For justice, Larry said. There's a difference. There's no profit in justice. Then I don't want profit. Larry closed his laptop. I'm restructuring this company with or without your support. I control 51% of shares. I don't need your votes. But I'd like your understanding. Jennifer shook her head. You'll lose half your net worth, minimum. Probably more. Your reputation in the development community will be destroyed. No one will work with you. Good, Larry said. Maybe then it'll actually be worth something. Marcus's voice dropped to something dangerous. You force this through, we'll fight you. Every step. We'll tie you up in litigation for years. We'll make sure you can't execute any of this feel-good nonsense. I expected that. Larry stood. Which is why I'm resigning as CEO effective immediately. I'm divesting my shares into a community trust. You can fight me in court if you want. But by the time you untangle the legal knots, the Hunts Point Center will be operational and 50 families will have pathways to ownership in our current properties. He picked up his briefcase. The vote to remove me is scheduled for next week. Don't bother. I'm gone. Larry walked toward the door. Behind him, voices erupted, angry, desperate, trying to call him back. He kept walking. Down the hall. Past his corner office with its view of the city he'd thought he owned. Into the elevator. Down 42 floors. On the street, New York swallowed him into its anonymous crowds. Nobody recognized the billionaire who'd just walked away from his empire. He was just another man in a suit, carrying a briefcase, looking lost. His phone rang 3 hours later while he sat in a Hunts Point coffee shop, 2 blocks from the warehouse. A number he didn't recognize. Mr. Fraser. This is Tamika Johnson with the New York Community Investment Collaborative. Larry straightened. Yes. We heard about your board meeting today. We've been tracking your company's developments for years, documenting the displacement. We've been waiting for someone with your access and resources to pivot. I'm listening. We represent a coalition of impact investors, community development funds, and housing justice organizations. We have capital. We have expertise. We have community trust. What we've been missing is someone who can navigate the development approval process and has relationships with city planning. Larry's heart pounded. What are you proposing? A partnership. We provide funding and community governance. You provide development expertise and industry access. But you have to be willing to cede real control. Not advisory boards or token community input. Actual decision-making power. Majority community representation on all boards. Binding accountability mechanisms. Larry thought of Sheila in that hospital bed. Change would cost everything. I'm willing, he said. You'll lose control of your own foundation. Your name might stay on the building, but you won't call the shots anymore. Good. I've called enough shots. It's time I learned to listen. Tamika was quiet. Sheila Murray is part of our coalition. She's been consulting with us for 3 years, documenting displacement. When she collapsed, we knew something had to change. Sheila. Of course. Even from a hospital bed, she'd been building the infrastructure to heal what he'd broken. "When can we meet?" Larry asked. "Tomorrow, 2 p.m., the Hunts Point warehouse." Sheila insists. Says if you're serious, you'll come to where she teaches, where you can't hide behind mahogany tables. Larry smiled. "Tell her I'll be there." He hung up and sat in the coffee shop until sunset, watching Hunts Point come alive. People heading home from work, mothers carrying groceries, teenagers laughing on corners, lives being lived in a neighborhood his company had marked for erasure. For the first time in his career, Larry wasn't calculating property values or development potential. He was just watching people be human. His phone buzzed with texts from his attorney, his board members, business reporters. He ignored them all. Let them talk. Let them call him crazy. Maybe they were right. Maybe this was professional suicide. But sitting in that coffee shop, watching Hunts Point live and breathe despite everything his company had done to kill it, Larry didn't feel lost. For the first time in his life, he felt found. His empire was falling. His reputation was burning. His net worth was evaporating. And somehow, impossibly, he felt wealthier than he'd ever been. Because tomorrow he'd walk into that warehouse not as a developer or a billionaire. He'd walk in as a student. And Sheila Murray, the woman he'd ignored for 5 years, who'd taught him the most expensive lesson of his life, would teach him how to build something worth more than money. How to build justice. How to build community. How to build a life that mattered. The tower had come down. And in its ruins, something real could finally grow. 6 months changes everything and nothing. The Hunts Point warehouse still stood on the same corner, but now it glowed. Solar panels caught the afternoon sun on the roof. In the lot next door, where broken concrete had sprouted weeds, a community garden grew. Tomatoes, peppers, herbs tended by volunteers, by children learning that things could grow even here. On the ground floor, a cafe trained local youth in culinary skills and business management, filling the street with the smell of fresh bread and brewing coffee. The Sheila Murray Community Learning Center. The sign hung above the entrance in letters big enough to be seen from blocks away. Not hidden, not apologizing, declaring its existence. Today, hundreds of people filled the converted warehouse for the grand opening. Former students who'd learned mathematics in a freezing basement now sat in bright classrooms with new desks and working heat. Displaced families who'd lost their homes to Fraser development projects stood alongside community organizers who'd fought those developments for years. A handful of billionaires clustered near the front, impact investors from Tamika's coalition, men and women who'd put their money where their conscience was, curious to see if transformation was real or just another rich man's performance of redemption. Larry sat in the back row, not on the stage, not cutting a ribbon, not giving a speech about his journey or his awakening. He'd learned something simpler and harder in these 6 months, that the need to be seen and celebrated was itself a symptom of the disease he was recovering from. The disease of ego, of thinking the story was about him. Sheila stood at the podium. She wore a dress the color of autumn leaves, burnt orange, warm, chosen by her for her own reasons, not a uniform someone else had selected. Her insulin pump was visible on her hip, no longer hidden under shapeless cardigans, no longer a source of shame. She'd gained weight, healthy weight, the kind that comes from eating regular meals and not rationing your own survival. "This center bears my name," Sheila said, her voice carrying across the room with the confidence of someone who'd spent 5 years teaching in a basement and knew how to make her words reach the back. "But it was built by all of us. Every person in this room. Every volunteer who painted walls. Every donor who gave what they could. Every child who believed they deserved a place to learn. And it belongs to all of us. Not to one man's guilt or one foundation's generosity. To the community that refused to die." The crowd erupted in applause. Larry clapped from his back row seat, tears running down his face for the 3rd time today, learning that crying was something his body did now when it encountered truth. Sheila continued. She talked about the children who'd passed their exams. The teenager who'd just received a full scholarship to CUNY. The mother who'd completed her GED here and enrolled in nursing school. The father who'd learned English in night classes and passed his contractor's license exam. Lives changed not by charity, but by access, by opportunity, by the simple radical act of treating people like they mattered. After the ceremony, as people mingled and ate food from the cafe and children ran through the garden, a girl approached Larry. Jasmine. She was taller than she'd been 6 months ago, wearing glasses now, carrying a book about space exploration under one arm. Miss Murray says you helped make this happen, Jasmine said. Direct. Unfiltered. The way children speak before the world teaches them to be careful. Miss Murray made this happen, Larry corrected gently. I just stopped standing in the way, which isn't the same as helping. It's just the bare minimum of not hurting. Jasmine considered this with the seriousness of someone who'd learned that words mattered. Are you still rich? She asked. Larry smiled. 6 months ago, the question would have made him defensive. Now it felt like an invitation to truth. That depends on how you measure, he said. I sold my penthouse, the place where I used to live, 42 floors up. I drive a used car now. I live in a 2-bedroom apartment 3 blocks from here. My bank account went from $2.4 billion to $340 million. Jasmine's eyes widened. That's still so much money. It is, Larry agreed. An obscene amount. More than anyone needs or deserves. But I'm learning that wealth should flow, not accumulate. That money sitting in offshore accounts is just another form of hoarding. So are you rich or not? Jasmine pressed. Larry thought about his penthouse furniture sitting in storage while his apartment held a simple desk, a futon, and bookshelves full of volumes on housing policy and reparative justice. About how he woke up each morning and walked to this center, not to be praised but to learn, to listen, to do whatever work needed doing. I have enough, he said finally, which might be the richest I've ever been. Jasmine nodded, satisfied with this answer in a way she wouldn't have been satisfied with a simple yes or no. She ran back to the celebration, back to her friends, back to the childhood she deserved. The sun began its descent, painting the Bronx in gold. Music played. Children danced. Community being lived out loud. Sheila found Larry at the edge of the garden, watching tomatoes grow in soil that had been broken concrete. You're still here, she asked. Not unkindly. I'm trying to learn how to be, Larry admitted. How to be present. To see people. To matter in a way that doesn't require a building with my name on it. It's harder than making money, Sheila observed. Everything worthwhile is. They stood together in comfortable silence. Not quite friends, maybe they never would be. But 2 people learning to share space with honesty. Learning what accountability looked like when lived quietly, daily. Thank you, Larry said, for teaching me that the only view that matters is at eye level, looking at the person in front of you. Sheila smiled. That lesson's free, Mr. Fraser. What's expensive is living it every day. Waking up and choosing to see. Again and again. Larry, he said. Please. Just Larry. Sheila turned to face him. Maybe someday. When you've earned it. It wasn't cruel. It was honest. And Larry understood that earning his name back would take longer than 6 months. Maybe years. Maybe never. And that would have to be okay too. Sheila walked back to the celebration. Larry followed, but not beside her. Behind. Learning finally to be led. The light faded. The community center glowed against the evening sky, warm lights spilling through windows where people gathered. The Bronx stretched out around it, wounded but resilient, rebuilding, waiting for the day when justice wasn't a gift from the powerful, but a right claimed by the many. 3 blocks away, in his 2-bedroom apartment, Larry's penthouse furniture sat in storage. His apartment held a simple desk and stacks of documents, not development proposals, but policy frameworks. Tenant rights legislation, affordable housing models, reparative justice programs. He worked late most nights, because 6 months wasn't enough to undo 6 years of harm. The bags Sheila once carried in secret now arrived by the truckload. Books, computers, food, seeds, all funded by the foundation Larry no longer controlled but finally understood. Community governed. His money, but not his decisions. He'd been wrong that first night when he followed Sheila through the rain, certain she was stealing. She wasn't stealing. She'd never been stealing. She was showing him what he'd stolen from everyone else. From 2,000 families. From Mrs. Chun and Marcus and a community that had existed, whole and alive, before he'd decided it would be worth more empty. And she'd given him something more valuable than his fortune, a chance. The only one that mattered. The chance to give it back. Not the buildings, those were gone. Not the years, those couldn't be reclaimed. But something else. His time. His resources. His commitment to repair, knowing it might never be enough. Doing it anyway because the alternative was to remain the man who'd looked away. Inside the center, children laughed. Sheila taught. Community gathered. Life happened in a space that almost wasn't. Larry walked back toward the celebration. Not to its center, not to be seen, just to be present, just to be one person among many. Learning finally that the only floor that mattered wasn't the 42nd where he'd ruled his empire. It was this one, ground level, eye to eye, human to human, where Sheila had been standing all along, waiting for him to finally look down and see her there. To all my amazing viewers, thank you. Every time you watch, like, and share my videos, you keep the echoes of love alive. Your support, your comments, and your time mean more than you know. This channel exists because of you. I appreciate you deeply.